Greg came out on the town planner. To the right, we have the assistant town planner, housing coordinator Karen Horn, Lynn Fiddler, one of our select board, Michael Moresco, town administrator. I know in the audience we have at least 2 of the Housing Partnership, now Housing Trust members. I will not force them to say anything, but they're here. We also have a planning board member. I know we have a member of the Housing Authority as well. Is there anybody I'm not recognizing or missing townwide office-wise?
Over there.
Nancy up from the Board of Appeals.
Larry King from the zoning board.
Thank you.
You're over there. Cecilia's delegate Dilo.
2 Housing Authority, sorry. Thank you. All right. Tonight I'm going to cover, hopefully, 3 topics. First one is the update to the housing section of the master plan. We have recently completed the economic development section of the master plan. We're trying to do it chapter by chapter. The last time it was done in 2015, it was over $100,000. So we are trying to do it in small increments and not be that expensive, which means a little more work on Karen and my side, but better for the town. The next thing we were going to discuss quickly is the 40B status for the town, which is the affordable housing 10% requirement for the state. And then the final thing that we were going to start having further discussions on is the MBTA communities zoning changes that will come for next April town meeting. I'm going to start simple because I did a test run with a person, and the first thing they said to me is, what is a master plan? So I said, all right, I better go back a little. So master plan is basically a tool for decision-making for long-term investment in the town. It typically deals with zoning, it covers open space, it covers housing. You can see all the different topics that under state law it's supposed to have. And in Massachusetts, it's recommended every 10 years that you update it. These are photos of recent housing developments in town. You have the mixed use over at Marketplace. You have the age restricted at Highland Green. Horseshoe Farm, Rights Way, there's a number of other subdivisions that have been built. Modera, which is now Madison, and the approved and soon to be under construction Mill Creek, which is now called, I think, Madison, Modera South. What?
South Shore.
South Shore. Thank you. Last year we had a housing symposium, and there was a chart similar to this, but it was missing the fact that we had Modera. So they showed a chart and they said, look, there's been no attached housing or affordable housing built, etc. That is not the case. This is the population in the town. You can see there was a dramatic rise with the opening of the highway and then busing and stuff. There were a number of influences, so you had a lot of growth. The zoning basically was changed in 1971 and 72 based on an update of the 1963 master plan, which basically said, look, you have limited capacity on water, streets, et cetera, et cetera. You need to have 1 acre zoning, you need to do this, you need to do that. So there were a number of recommendations, and that's how we pretty much got the zoning map, which is the smaller map in the back. That's been about the same since 1971. We have tinkered with it and stuff, and you can see that we have kind of leveled off. They were recommending that we were in the 30,000, 25, 28, 30 range, and that's where we are roughly currently with our zone. This is the median gross rent, both in Marshfield and Plymouth County. The interesting thing here is you can see not a very big increase between 1990 and 2000, but there's quite a jump between 2000 and 2010. And then again, it doesn't look too bad 2021. However, so U.S. Census had our gross rent at 1,334. If you, and Heidi was kind enough to give us some figures for rental properties, what the listings are. But then Karen went to the Madison website and got their latest numbers. And you can see there is a dramatic increase in rental prices. This is the median sales price for both housing and or single-family homes and condominiums. The condominiums are in that orangey brown, and the single-family house prices are in the blue. Since 2004, the town of Marshfield, through the Housing Partnership and the Housing Production Plan, had the following 4 housing goals. And basically, the master plan in 2015 took those 4 goals and added some recommendations, which I'll get to in a moment. But basically, it was to enhance housing choices for a full range of income and to promote diversity, to leverage public and private funds and resources to the greatest extent possible, to ensure new housing that's created is harmonious to the community, the existing community, and I would put that both environmentally as well as character or type of homes. And to try to surpass the 10%, which we'll get to in a few minutes, the 10% affordable housing goal for the state. So I'm going to ask you some questions while we go through, and you'll see the questions will be blue and fairly big. So, do those goals still sound okay, or are there other goals that we should be adding or thinking about, or should we be modifying these goals? And you don't have to worry, you can send emails to us later, etc. But if you have some thoughts right now, that's fine. If not, I'll proceed to the next slide. Okay, I'll take it as yes?
I guess they're looking at that and asking, what is the point in building affordable housing and increasing the number of units when the rental rate goes up? We're looking at what, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 for a 3-bedroom rental?
They are fairly expensive on the market rate side. The affordable units are a little less expensive. They're the lower range of that 3 to 4 units. All I know is the state has had a lot of thought about that, and it kind of goes into the MBTA housing or communities changes that they want. Their thought is the more units you have, eventually the prices will lower. I'll leave it at that. The 2015 section of the master plan, as I mentioned, had some additional recommendations. Here's some of those recommendations. The first goal was to meet the 10% requirement under Chapter 40B. So our first recommendation was inventory town-owned lands, tax title properties, and see if there's any potential lots or sites to be used. We have done that in the past. South Shore Habitat's got a number of lots. The former Grace Ryder School was reused. The former Old South Grammar School, which was the Hancock Paint Building, and it was also our previous library. That has been used for housing as well. So the red is me, because when we did the economic development plan, people wanted to know where we were on those recommendations that you guys decided on in 2015. So I'm trying to give you a little background. Here's what we've done so far. Next one is to create a policy, a certain amount of on-site affordable housing would receive priority for sewer service. Now that sounds like a good idea, but when you really think about it, it's got some problems. And number one is the sewer's in the denser part of town already. Number two, we have a limited capacity on the sewer treatment plant, and the DPW has already identified if they need to, they need to expand the sewer line, because we have in the Blackmount area nitrogen loading issue that we need to deal with. So Blackmount, and then you have Kent Park, Ferry Hill, Bayberry, and Ridge Road. All those areas need sewer connections, and now it's pretty much tie up the sewer connection. So on that policy, there's some stuff that we have to think about when we get back to working on those policies. And then the last one was the review and the revise the inclusionary zoning bylaw. So that bylaw was passed like 15 years ago, maybe 18 years ago. It has not been used. We do have inclusionary requirements in our age restricted villages and also in our PMUD. So, and also in the downtown, that when you build units, you have to have 10% of the units have to be affordable. But this particular bylaw was for single-family subdivisions, and there is really no incentive, the way it was drafted, for a developer to use that bylaw. Since I started with that first recommendation, it was Chapter 40B. Here is your subsidized housing inventory for Marshfield back in 2013, before that master plan was done, 5.5. 2016, we had gotten up to 569. By 2020, actually, but this was the date that I took, we were up to 8.3. We have now finally gotten the US Census occupied housing unit numbers. And we have dropped, as I had predicted we would drop, back down below 8. We didn't drop as low as I thought. We only went to 7.75, which is not good, but not bad. It could have been worse.
Pardon me, real quick, that's not inclusive of the new project that was just...
I'm getting there. All right, how do we compare to the surrounding towns? Hanover is the only only town right now that is at 10% with our immediately surrounding communities. Now, back to your point. So, Veterans House is not on the SHI list yet, so that gets added. Mill Creek, 270 units. We'll start construction October, November. It will take 2 years for them to build out, but it's going to start construction. That gets us up to 10.3. Bridle Path, we have a new owner that's expected to come back to the ZBA with a modification request. That would get us, if it stays at 40, he would like additional units because he's got to do things that we wanted to do, less earth removal, etc. That would get us to 1075. Long dormant 40B that we approved many years ago would get us up to 11%. So we would surpass our 10%. That one was approved, but it has problems with the CR and on the open space. Back on the affordability for a moment, when we talk about affordable housing, 80% of the area median income is what they're talking about. So for a one person, that's $82,000. For 2 people, 94, 106 for 3, and 118 for a family of 4. How does that relate to things? Because a lot of times when we say we're building affordable housing, people are like, oh no, we don't want, those are really low-income people. It is not low-income people. Professional level staff at Town Hall starts at 68 to 76. New teachers start at 69. The secretaries, etc., at Town Hall make a lot less. My former secretary could not live in an affordable housing unit. She was making $45,000 a year. So when you think about affordable housing, it is not, the low-income people from somewhere else. It is a lot of us who work or live in the town. Eric, we have something for you. So, one of Karen's many talents is she can do GIS. It has taken quite a while, but Eric has asked about this multiple times, and Karen has finally figured it out. And our GLAM right now is 1.27. We're supposed to be 1.5. So what that does is it takes all, it has certain calculations you have to do, and then it looks at how much open space you have, how many 40B projects do you have, how big they are, etc. So that's our number right now. To get to that GLAM, we would need a combination of roughly 1,570 acres of additional town-owned land, because that is rated lower in the way the state does it, or 30 more acres of land occupied by buildings and parking, etc., of Chapter 40B developments. With the 3 developments that I mentioned, and not even Webster Point, we will be getting very close to that 1.5. Now, one thing to remember about the GLAM is we have a limited amount of time. So in the future, say we get to 1.5. Then somebody walks in and files another 40B with the town. We have a limited amount of time that we have to do a fresh calculation and get it approved by the state in order for us to say, no thanks, we don't need you, or why don't you sit down with us and redesign your development and make it more what we would like to see in the town. So those are the 2 ways. You get 10% or you get the GLAM. The difference with the GLAM, which is why Eric has been asking every time we get a 40B, is one and done. Every 10 years, we don't have to worry about the US Census changing. The other thing to keep in mind is additional open space also helps us with our CRS flood reduction, or lowering of the insurance rates, etc. So when people say, oh, why do we want to buy wetlands, or why do we want to buy more town land, those calculations helps the town on several different fronts. Back to that first series of recommendations, again, is there any changes that you guys can think of with these 3 recommendations? Again, this will be taped. You can watch this several times, and you can always email us stuff. This is not going to be something that's going to be done in a couple of weeks. This is going to be probably about 5 or 6 months before we get this section done. Recommendation 2, provide high-quality, affordable housing in attractive neighborhoods. So we have 3 different things that were in here, and to update you on where we are, the mixed-use and infill development was recommended in the downtown, the planned use mixed-use development out by the industrial park by Roach Brothers, and the B4 areas in Brant Rock, which is the Brant Rock Village overlay. So town meeting has approved changes that allow residential above commercial in the downtown, and made changes to the Brant Rock Village overlay to encourage more mixed-use development. We added a full 3rd floor. Remember, it was 2.5. On the second one, consider revising the zoning bylaw to encourage development for duplexes and townhouses in order to increase those types of developments. The town did, at town meeting in 2019, approve an age-restricted village and an open space residential development changes that help towards those. Now, the affordable village has not happened yet. We had spent quite a bit of time with the neighborhood, the landowner, and a potential builder. And everybody said, yes, we can live with these things. Unfortunately, a few months later, Mill Creek comes in at 270 units at almost 23 units per acre, and it blew this out of the water, because now people are like, that's only 3 units per acre, I want a lot more. So we can rethink about this one, but that's what had happened to that one. We were all set, we had all our ducks in a row, and then a 40B walked in and kind of blew that out of the water. And then the last thing was design guidelines. The town has tried several times to have design guidelines. They've never made it all the way through, because somebody always has a problem with something in the designs. We have at town meeting put some design guidelines in the affordable housing village, and also in the residential above in the PMUD, the B1, and the Brant Rock Village. So that's kind of the update on where we were for those recommendations. A couple of more recommendations was consider revising the current accessory apartment bylaw. We did make a change that removed, we had a 3-year waiting period, because back when it was approved, the fear was people are going to start building these monster houses, and they're going to build unit in and use that as to get a bigger house. So the idea back then was let them wait for 3 years, then they can have an accessory apartment. It did not affect existing housing at all, but there was some confusion with the zoning board on whether or not it did and stuff, so we made that change. There are other changes that we are considering. One of them is to make accessory apartment by right. But keep in mind, the accessory apartments, we do not have deed restrictions, and we don't really want to get into rent control. Because then we're going to have a whole new department of people to run rent control. So these don't count towards our affordable units. So always keep that in mind when you talk about the accessory units. The last of the recommendations under number 2 is pursue housing in the town center and in Brent Rock. We did that with the 2021 zoning changes. Any suggestions on the recommendations number 2 at the moment? Eric, I can see.
I was kind of the accessory apartments you're saying. You talk about rent control and they can't count towards the 10%. But you said you need to hold an apartment if you want that rent control away, I guess.
Or we had deed restrictions on the house with that it had to be an affordable unit,
So,
which most people are not going to want to put on their property, which is why we haven't gone there.
without getting into the whole thing of it, but I'm just, so what you're saying is, if someone wanted to put an accessory apartment on, and it was limited, I guess you could say, in regards to what the rent was gonna be.
But there's no way to make that requirement,
Why is that?
because that would be rent control. And then we would need somebody to keep track of that
So you
rent.
would actually need to hire somebody by state law, I'm under the impression?
Or,
Well, they would need to be units recognized by the state under the local initiative program, like all the 40B units, to be counted on our
That's
subsidized housing list. The accessory apartments may be cheaper in rent by definition, but in order for them to count, we'd have to go through the formal application process with DHCD or whatever they're called.
and show that there's some type of deed restriction or rent control on them.
And most
All right, so that
homeowners
doesn't
aren't
seem-
gonna want that.
What's that?
Most homeowners aren't gonna want that.
So the way I look at the accessory apartments is, what it's written is now that it has to be in the existing or the single-family home. It can't be an accessory building or anything like that. And it has to look still like a single-family home.
No, no,
The
right,
owner
right,
needs to live in
And the
one.
owner needs to live in it. And over time, that house may change back into a single family. It may not always be an
What would be,
accessory
what
apartment.
would be the deed restriction though?
To say the people who live in it meet the affordability requirements
Requirement.
of less than 80% of the median income.
We are going to be working on the accessory apartments, but what I was trying to say is keep in mind that they don't count. They don't help us. And actually,
No, that's why-
they could
that's why-
end up hurting us.
Well, that's why I'm asking, because you're saying that if the accessory apartments, and more likely when someone builds an accessory apartment, it's for their parents. And so I guess,
But we do not call them in-law apartments, and we do not have that restriction on them.
but what I was looking at here is that you said it doesn't count towards the 10%, so what you're saying is that those properties, if they had accessory apartments on them with some sort of restriction, they would, the whole
We
property,
could
the whole
potentially
property,
have it count.
the whole property would count towards that 1.5%.
The whole property wouldn't, it would only be the one unit. I mean, accessory apartments increase the housing stock and probably help more with, say, workforce housing, with people's grown children may want to live there or something like that. And the owner could live in the apartment and rent out the house. But to have it count on the SHI list is what Greg's referring to.
Well, I see, I understand that, it's just that I think we're getting hurt in a bigger way in regards to the amount of 40Bs that want to be built. So the whole thing is that you weigh it out, and I just look at that, if you have a number of accessory apartments that people may want to put on, I'm sure there are ways to work it, but make it count towards our 10% goal. I think that would be better for the town on the overall.
If we could come up with a way to make that happen, I would agree.
Well, let's put it this way. I think the town could, because it always seems the way that the town wants something, they always put it away that they want to make. So I think that if there is a way to make it work, and in the overall end, it will be beneficial to the town as a whole.
Keep in mind, we haven't gotten to the MBTA communities part.
Oh, I know. We're all looking forward to hearing about that more.
Greg, it's my understanding, and I'm not sure if I got the right name, that Winslow Village and some of the other places that were built years ago, are all of those units, would they qualify as affordable units?
They're on the SHI list.
They are.
Yep.
So there's nothing that was built at that time that,
All the apartments that were built in this, between 69 and 71, so when you come into town on the north side of 139, and then when you go down Marshfield Neck, you can see some more apartments and stuff. None of those count, even though for years, historically, they've been lower rents and stuff, because there are not deed restrictions on them. The town, in the past, has kind of looked into purchasing, because when the prices go down on the housing, usually the condo prices go lower. And at times in the past, I know at one point I was pushing that we should be purchasing some of those units for the SHI list. And then either renting them out or reselling with deed restrictions and stuff. That, again, depends on the financial well-being of the town. At the time, we didn't have the ability to do it. But that's another way of doing it. We could start purchasing, similar to Jack Mathers had that program where 28 of the single-family homes in town were bought, rehabbed, and then resold through the housing partnership and stuff. I forget the initials. MPOP.
Housing Opportunity Purchase
Program.
Program.
So that's similar to it, but it was for the single-family homes. So getting back to Eric's point, we are trying to do it scattered, small scale, et cetera, more in keeping with the neighborhoods.
so that could be done, could still be done.
It still can be done. And in fact, that could be, we could rewrite the recommendations to say that's what we would prefer type of thing.
Excuse me, real quick, could we
Yep.
put some of this affordable language in the permitting process? And the order of
It is
conditions?
in the permitting process, but for what, which
Like in the
one?
order of conditions, some of this affordable language for an accessory unit. Would that
We
be a
could put it-
workaround?
Well, we could go to zone, yeah, we could put town meeting, put the language in and stuff. I don't know.
Would that assist us?
Yes, but if we do it, I don't know how many people will be coming in for accessory apartments. Remember, we also have a fairly large number of accessory apartments that were never permitted, that are out there, that we're not going to do anything about. So it's out there. We can look into the language, we can try that, but it gets back to the point of then we have to get on that state SHI list, so that we have to prove that those units are being rented at an affordable price. Recommendation number 3, build capacity to promote affordable housing activities. So continue to hold education campaigns for affordable housing. The Housing Partnership has been doing that in the past. Hold educational programs for preventing and dealing with foreclosures. Again, the Housing Partnership has been doing that in the past. Continue to fund the housing coordinator position. So we have recently hired a new housing coordinator. We had a very good housing coordinator. Unfortunately, he passed 5 years ago. And during that same time, we had some turnaround on the Housing Partnership. They had lost a long-time chair. They had other people, members that had health issues and stuff. So for the last 5 years, they've really struggled. Now, Michael is done with the housing coordinator part. He's put town money towards that. They are also, with last town meeting, they brought the article back to get the housing trust, which allows the money that the planning board gets. So when we have projects, we prefer them to build the affordable units in the development. But in Highland Green's case, the state changed the law and said you can't have age-restricted housing count as affordable units anymore. So the developer had to give us money in fee in lieu of. And that money would go to the housing partnership for projects to do stuff, but it was being held by the housing authority. And by getting the housing trust part, we now have the housing partnership has this ability. And I don't know if the housing partnership is going to continue to exist or is it being merged into the housing trust. That has not been decided yet. But that gives them the financial being to hold their own bank account and expend the money better. So on the housing partnership side, they've had a rough patch, but they're gearing back up and they're now part of that housing trust. Was that a fair statement on our side?
Yes, excellent.
Question, Eric?
Yeah, because as I'm reading that, that's the one thing I'm wondering, especially in regards to this housing trust, because I mean, in regards to the MLOC, you have, it looks like you have two entities there that are overlapping each other. So I guess, what is going to go on with MHOP? And if Mr. Marshfield can answer it, is the MHOP going to be folded into the trust?
Well, the trust would be able to spend the money for the MHOP units.
Well,
I think
what's it,
it's
where's MHOP getting its money from and how is it spending its money? Because I mean, it says right there, MHOP has created 28 units of affordable
Right.
units and counts to 10%, so there must
Which
be
is
some
what
kind
I
of,
said
there must
a
be
few minutes
some
ago.
kind of funding, right? So, MHOP getting funding?
They were their bank was the housing authority, which the housing authority really didn't want to be their bank. And by having the trust, now there's more control.
What's it, CPC funds?
CPC funds were also used as well, yes. So that's the funding sources either come from the planning board special permits or from CPC funds. And that's what's was used for that and would be used for other projects. If they wanted to go into buying condos, if the market dips, et cetera, that type of stuff.
Yeah, this is, this housing trust thing, it's got question marks all over it, especially when you look at MHOP and the CPC and all that. It's, I don't know. Right, go ahead, continue on, I want to meld into it all.
Craig,
Yeah.
I'm just, with Mr. Kelly, I'm just a little curious if you could articulate what his concern is, because I've heard him say this a couple of times. I'm just curious what you think is going to happen. So we have the housing trust that was explained, that gives more control. When the housing partnership was created, town meeting, rightfully so, was kind of nervous way back then. I was a selectman and said, hey, let's start off with the housing partnership because we all understand, you know, housing costs are going up. Our own kids can't live here. But we don't want to give free rein for you to be able to do stuff. So under the housing trust, if you remember correctly, Mr. Kelly, and when the language is very specific, that the housing trust, yes, money will funnel into there, and yes, they can fund things like the MHOP program, but they're not going to be able to do anything because the language is explicitly written into the trust that they have to come to town meeting, and it's up to the legislative body of town meeting if that's a direction or a project that they want to undertake. So there are safeguards that address, I think, what your concern is.
Well, that to a certain degree, the whole thing is that now we have another entity that was established, which you have the housing authority, but then you have the MHOP. So,
But the MHOP was part of the housing partnership. The housing partnership has now been kind of put into the housing trust.
And the housing partnership, we haven't had a discussion yet, but when you read the trust is the housing partnership, and it will morph into that, so there will be only one entity.
so is that what,
So
so
there's
that's
not
what I was asking
competing.
earlier, so is the
It's
housing
not
partnership
competing, but I
going
think
to be eliminated and put into the housing trust? Is that what
it
we're
will
going to?
morph into that, yes, because it will have the same objectives.
And the MPOP program is a purchasing program within the entity that just sort of runs it. It's not its own thing.
So what you're
Meaning
saying-
the housing partnership ran the MPOP in the
Right, the
past.
housing partnership, and then assuming that's what the decision
Housing
is.
trust gets it.
The housing trust would then oversee it, but the problem with, outside the scope, the problem with the housing partnership, the MPOP program, properties are too expensive for us to put that much money into that program right now. So,
I understand that, but let's put it this way, I think the previous housing meeting, Mr. Gein was talking about some open parcels and what to do with it. And all it is that, in thinking about it, especially in regards to the cost of housing, I should say, for you to purchase, but all it is that, what about starter homes for people? And I think that is something that.
that's what we're trying to figure out. We'd like to have a lot of starter homes for
So the-
affordable homes.
The problem with the starter homes, because I hear this a lot too, no builder wants to make a Levittown. They want to maximize their profit, so the house prices, they're going for the top range of the house prices.
Well,
One of the ways you could address that is, and I heard on NPR when I was driving this afternoon, the state is looking into investing money to help subsidize to get some starter homes. That would be a great idea. That would be a big
Well, let
help.
me ask this question, Mr. Keenan, because since it's been a discussion point for a little while, how much are the developers paying the planning board in regards to skirting the affordable housing thing in regards to the in lieu money?
What?
So the developers developing a parcel, multiple houses, right?
Okay, so Highland Green, I think I get what you're saying. Highland Green, we were supposed to have, was it 2 affordable units?
Yes.
Yes.
They pay 40% of the price, the market price of the unit towards, and then they didn't have to build the affordable unit.
So,
So they were selling, what were they selling at the time? 600? So 40% of that 600, we got 2 units, we got that amount of money, and that was put aside for either this program or,
Issues for MPOP.
and some of that money was used towards the Veterans House. A lot of money was used towards the Veterans House. And not just housing money, we used historic preservation money because of the building as well. So that's where that money, so if somebody comes in and they don't want to build the units on site, then they have to pay 40% of whatever that market rate of those units that they're selling towards us getting to figure out a way to get.
so that's a good chunk of change when that happens, it sounds like. So, and then you get the CPC end of it as well.
All right, Eric, can we, I'm at slide 24. I have 44 slides. I'd like to get through everything first. We can come back to this for more details if you want later. Hold on.
Can I just ask a question? Where does that number 40% come from?
That's written in the bylaw,
In the bylaw of the
the
town?
zoning bylaw,
Okay.
for the PMUD, for those, and for the age-restricted units. So when I said inclusionary bylaw, we have other pieces of the zoning that have inclusionary requirements in it. That's one of them. So when I first got here, I was like, 40% seems kind of low. So I went to town meeting, we bumped it up to 60%. That caused all kinds of problems. The 2 times we had this come up, both times they were like, no, this doesn't work. And the planning board spent a lot of time talking to the development side, worked through the numbers with them, and they said, you know what, we should go back to the 40% because 60%, they're losing money. They're not even breaking even, they're losing money. So that's why it was turned, we went back to town meeting and dropped it back down to 40%. All right, so a few more things on the housing update side, then we're going to get into the MBTA communities. So regional trend, yep, I'm sorry.
I just want to make a quick comment.
Okay.
The problem with the old housing trust proposal many years ago was that it came with a production plan of something like 70 units a year. That's what scared people. They didn't want an unaccountable fund that was going to be building scores of units per year. That was the problem. When it was defeated, and Jack Mather and Wendell Carr, rest their souls, got involved, they had it right. They said, okay, we're going to be given a limited stream of money, and we're going to engage in a slow, deliberate production of primarily owner or occupied in houses, which is a great idea, which can still be done.
And the housing partnership and Jack were beaten a lot by people who were like, you're not doing enough, this is too slow, we need, you know.
Right.
So
They were trying to balance, but they were still producing good stuff.
producing something is better than producing nothing.
At the
And
same-
unfortunately, the state with the housing production plans required the town back then for that 70 units per number. That's what the state expected to see. Again, sometimes we have unrealistic expectations placed on us.
There's unfunded mandates like that.
So long as we're doing something and moving forward, I think we're going in the right direction.
Right, and in the meantime, it's important to fight these 40Bs and to get everybody involved in getting 40B law amended, if not outright repealed.
So as I tried to explain already, we're getting close on both fronts
Right.
to get to the point where we can say we only want a friendly 40B, which we decide.
And a final point about the existing housing trust, which was passed by a town meeting. It's still a scary thing because it is an unelected and unaccountable board that does not necessarily, as has been stated earlier tonight, have to come to town meeting for money. Once they build up enough assets, they can borrow against their own assets and they won't need town meeting. Now, how they're going to tap into various monies coming out of the CPA tax, which is significant, I don't know what it is, the set aside every year for affordable housing is very significant. It's enough to keep the MHOP going and to acquire and build other units. How they're going to tap into that, we don't know.
Joe, I got a
How they're
simple
going to get
answer.
into the money held by the housing authority is also another problem, because by law, it's supposed to go to the housing authority,
I got a
which can
simple
then
answer
use it.
on the housing trust, right?
Right,
They're appointed by your select board.
right.
So if you don't like what's going on,
No, well,
change your select board. That's your simple answer. If you want to know how to do things, the residents have the ability to do it. If they want it bad enough, they can change it. On transportation, because transportation is part of this whole housing thing. We constantly hear, oh, we're going to move all these people down into Marshfield because everybody wants to live in Marshfield. Problem is, Greenbush is way up there. Kingston's way down here. We have an express bus service, runs from Plymouth right by us, stops at Rockland, then goes to South Station and the airport. We have a Gatra line, which is this purple meandering 1 hour and 20-minute full trip ride that you can take, which is good. And if you look at the employment centers, look at where the employment centers are locally, and look at where a portion of the Gatra route is, right where it should be. We've had discussion with Gatra many times about running up to Greenbush. There's not much up there. But look, if we go up to Hanover, which 3 years ago, Gatra was talking about splitting this route in half. The northern half would be extended all the way up to where the Hanover Mall was. The southern half would stay where it is, and you would just transfer buses, probably at our senior center, to get to one if you wanted to go south versus north. Look at the employment centers that make a lot more sense for if we're moving people into town, they should get jobs closer to us and not in Boston, because we don't have the ability to get them to Boston. Last thing, or 2 more slides on this, but I've heard a lot about housing problems have been caused by rich, snobby suburban towns. Marshfield is not a rich, snobby town. If you look, over 25% of the residents are low income or less. Economically, demographically, we're an extremely diverse town. Again, look at the Gatchel route and look at the areas where we have a high concentration of people with low income. Public assistance. Again, Gatchel route, look where the concentrations are. Also, if you notice when we hear the rich suburban snotty town comment type of thing, snobby towns, look at the adjacent towns versus Marshfield on both those maps. So we have, oops, went too far. We have 264 units available for elderly, disabled households, and we have 169 units for families. And that does include the new Mill Creek, those numbers. Final comment on the overall housing. We got to remember carrying capacity. That's what our first master plan did in the 60s, again in the 70s, etc. There are many, and I didn't touch, I had probably another 12 slides, but I was told to get rid of them because I was going too far into the weeds. There are many other factors in the housing thing. Location, quality of school, commute to work, safety, availability of land, land use regulations, yes, ability to work at home, amenities, beaches, ponds, rivers. I have friends that come from Braintree and there's so much green here. This is such a nice town. That's a reason people want to live here. Housing, household makeup, housing choices, interest rates, prices. There's so many different things that affect it, which is why when we had the housing symposium and they were kind of beating us up, I said it is more than just regulations. It's more than just zoning. There are so many factors that influence this. So when we talk about zoning changes and stuff, we need to remember we have a carrying capacity. We have roads, sewers, water networks, aquifers, wetlands, etc. Our focus has been historically in this town to try to, we don't like regional things, we don't like to regionalize, we don't want to become part of a regional sewer system or water network. Let's take care of ourselves. So we should always keep that in mind. Any other thoughts or questions on the housing and 40B section for this? Yes.
Just a clarification, did I hear you say when the new Mill Creek Phase 2 is built, we will be at the 10%?
Yes, we will. Until the next census, every 10 years. So what happens is you have 10 years of growth that then hits you, and then you fall back again. Which is why if you work on the GLAM and you get to the point where we are at 1.5 or above, we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to worry about the census. Harold.
Since you brought it up.
The GLAM?
Yes.
Okay.
What are there any plans to seek wetlands or whatever else like that for the town to purchase? Maybe even being donated by property owners to reach that 1.5%.
So we picked up the 111 acres from Red Gold Farm, open space residential development, which is,
that already counted towards what you showed?
that we've already counted that.
All right, so
And we have 33 acres that the town purchased, well, voted to purchase last year, but the deal has not been finalized yet, which is marshland by Rexon Beach.
We're very close.
We have several other properties that we have recommended to the selectmen to look at for tax title, etc. So yes, we got to keep chipping away at the open space. Having the 40Bs that are already permitted developed will get us over the top.
but what
The
about,
combination of those two things will get you over the 1.5.
But
The
you said
exact
that-
number, I can't tell you right now.
but you said wetlands and stuff like that.
Because if it's town-owned, on the GLAM, it doesn't count.
Well, it does, it's removed.
It's removed.
As developable land.
And on the CRS, it wetlands and town-owned remove or give us points on the
So when you say,
insurance.
all right, so when you say remove from what?
The town's total buildable area. So you want to get the town
You want to
smaller.
lower that number as low as possible to get that 1.5.
So are you saying that if the town picked up wetlands, whatever, it would not lower it, it would increase?
It would, but we need close to 1,500 acres to do it that way.
Just by open
Because
space, we would need the
it's
50.
the denominator.
All right, so what I'm saying is, I believe there are probably many property owners in town that probably have those wetlands, whatever, attached to their property. Was there any mention of maybe going out to them and saying, hey, you know, the town's looking to pick up X amount?
On the GLAM, it's not just a conservation restriction. It needs to be parcels that the town can own. And if you have an acre lot, but half of it happens to be wetlands, you can't carve it off your lot and give it to the town, because you can't make your lot non-conforming. So the little bits of wetlands around aren't necessarily gonna work for the GLAM.
It could help us on CRS, but
Right.
it isn't going to help us on the plan.
Because in CRs help, but on the GLAM, it needs to be basically town or government owned.
Michael,
Or
did you-
completely regulated, so nothing can.
Do you want to add something?
Just one point so people aren't confused. Even if we did GLAM right now, the 40B that's got its permit, comprehensive permit, that will be built. So we're not gonna stop that one. That gets built, we get to the 10%, that will give us like another 8.5.
Well, that
9
being
years.
built also helps us towards our plan.
Correct.
And like I said earlier, there is a limited window, the way the state wrote the law, there is a limited time frame. I walk in and I slap the, 40B down on the ZBA. We have a limited time clock that we have to redo all those calculations and show that we're over 1.5 and get it into the state.
And what's your expectation on that time frame? Is it, so you get the GLAM, you're going to the state, and I know that the clock is ticking.
It starts ticking from when they first filed with the state, what's the notice of intent or whatever. Yeah.
So it's based on that?
Yes, we would have, it's like a couple of weeks that we need
Yeah,
to
it's a
submit
very
to say
limited
we're
time.
going to do this. And then the applicant needs to be notified, the state needs to be notified.
So we need shovels ready?
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I'm trying, yes. That's the point I'm trying to get across.
Okay, thank you.
Just,
Hold on, Eric, we got someone
okay,
else who
sorry.
hasn't spoken.
Not literal shovels.
So I'm just wondering if, with that GLAM, is there anybody that is trying to specifically pinpoint those pieces of land that could be purchased by the town?
The Conservation Commission, the Planning Department, we've had discussions, we've identified potential sites for tax purposes that could help us, et cetera.
Okay, so what, in identifying those, how many roughly?
I don't know the total
The
acreage
number of
rate
acres you
off the
don't
top of
know.
my head, but it's not gonna be 1,500.
No, but I'm just wondering.
Which is why we're saying the combination
Right.
will get us
Of the
there.
two, yeah.
All right. Quickly, Eric.
I know you said the 1.5%, we reached that, then we should be all set. But you're saying,
We have to be ready when it comes.
Well, the whole thing is that.
We
you don't-
can't use this one, we have to redo our.
No, yeah, right, every time you add a parcel on, you gotta add on to the map and all that, and everything. So I'm just saying, but with the.
Or look at it the other way. We have a friendly developer come in on a friendly 40B that does what we would like to. We don't have to worry about the plan being done in the 2-week or whatever, 3-week time period type of thing.
Yeah, I don't know who's friendly out there, to be honest with you, in regards to those developers. In regards to the new Mill Creek, you saying that once that construction started, we reached that 10%, or is it after it's
When it's
completed?
completed.
When it's completed.
We have a 2-year safe harbor because of the number of units. So that 2-year construction period, we're basically covered by safe harbor. So right
We
now,
don't have to allow
a
any.
friendly 40B would be the only way somebody would get in.
Okay,
All
so we're,
Can we,
Yeah, but I was just gonna say that clock starts ticking, not when they put the shovel in the ground, but when they get their permit.
When they final state plan. All right, the MBTA communities. Let me start because I have been not attacked, but I have been chastised a little about why are you working on this. This is not something most towns want to do. This is something that the state is telling the towns they have to do. But it is also something that town meeting will decide next April. So the main points on the MBTA communities is we have to have a zoning ordinance that allows multifamily housing by right, which I would prefer if it was a special permit because it gives us a little flexibility and also says we could say no to a really bad project. We have to have minimum gross density of 15 units per acre. It has to be, I love this one, no more than a half mile from a commuter rail station, subway station, ferry terminal, or bus stop. We can't have age restrictions, and it has to be suitable for children. So they have changed twice these guidelines. They've already made 2 different changes. They do not have to notify the towns. There has no public discussion. They, the state, can just change these. Fortunately, they did add that 10% of the units could be affordable, because that was one of the first things I said right from the start. Wait a minute, you're making it worse for us by these requirements because none of these units are affordable and will count our SHI. They started with 3 discretionary grants. Their most recent changes, they've added a few more to incentivize why the towns should do this. Of these grants, the bottom 3, maybe the town could be interested in. The land use planning grants, we've done pretty well on our own. Acquisition, we might be interested in the future. MVP, we've already had 2 MVP grants. The first one was to get us into the program, and the second one was to do long-range resiliency, coastal resiliency study. We don't have anything immediately in the pipeline, but there is the possibility in the future that we could be interested in an MVP grant. The state, under its guidelines, considers us an MBTA adjacent community because we have commuter rail to Situate. Adjacent communities are required to have 10% of their housing stock as multifamily. Just a little aside, currently roughly 15% of the town's housing stock is already multifamily. We have a lot of apartments, we have townhouses, etc. When Mill Creek is built, we will probably be in the 18% range.
Do the, accessory apartments count as multifamily? Just curious. Sorry.
We don't talk about those. Single family homes. So to get, the state wants us to have zoning to allow 1,158 multifamily units. At 15 units per acre, we would need probably at least 77 acres. But in order, if we were to have parking requirements and buffers and stuff like that, we're probably looking at 80+ range for rezoning an area. I will say up front, my job is to produce the best language for town meeting for the town possible. That is what I'm going to be striving to do. This is the process, and again, thank goodness we had Karen, because we had the GIS abilities to run all this, which is what the state tells us to do, and to produce the map over there, which is the excluded and sensitive areas map. State guidelines are very prescriptive, very little flexibility. requires a minimum of half the district to be contiguous. Excluded lands, they definitely want you to stay away from. Sensitive lands, they would really like you to stay away from. One important part is the state does allow the communities to include lands that is already developed. And the state has told us repeatedly that is a fact, and that they don't expect the town to build these units, they just expect the town to zone for these units. Here's our lovely map. Everything that's got a color on it is either the sensitive or excluded lands. We also show our GATRA route. The state wanted us to focus half mile within a train station, along transit routes, walking distance to stores and services, in villages or downtown, along commercially zoned areas. Looking at the town, looking at the map, you see some white scattered around, but here's our transit route. So our first cut, we had no land that we could recommend being an MBTA zoning district. We went at it again. We kind of modified the state suggestions, but you can see we still tried to follow the GATRA route, walking distance to services. We checked the village centers. None of the village centers really work. Brent Rock doesn't work. You know, Seaview, that doesn't work. We avoided the excluded lands. We tried to avoid sensitive lands. We also tried not to overload an area. I've had people say, oh, just throw it in the industrial district. We already have 240Bs in the industrial district. We have other residents in that area. To me, that's kind of overloading that area. Try to improve existing land uses as possible. So we have certain uses in our B2 district, which I'll get to in a minute, that shouldn't really be in there because it's also our zone 2 for our drinking water. So when I make comments like trying to improve the land uses, that's where we were coming from. So here's the new high school, here's the middle school, this is 139, and this is School Street. We have a lot of businesses on the north side on the B2. This is the perk dealer in the middle. But you can see we have a lot of old apartments that were built in the 1960s in that area as well. So we had 3 areas. We looked at the downtown, we looked at the industrial area, and we looked at this area. And what we came up with is, because we're supposed to stay away from excluded features, we ended up with this area, no excluded features, which you can see in the industrial district, but it is in our zone 2. Now you can say, well, why didn't you put it down here as well? But this little stripe lines, this is Pembroke's new zone 2. I can't really promote us putting it on a zone 2, even if it's not our zone 2. You also have other excluded features in that area, and we could not come up with 50% of the required 77 acres to fit there. So we had a deadline of January 1st, 2023 to submit the action plan. We were late because the selectmen, the town administrator, and I, and the planning board wanted more public discussion before we were going to go down that road. We had some public discussion. We did submit it in April finally. The state did grant us compliance interim compliance. The state still expects us to pass zoning changes by December 31st of 2024. The reason we're going to the April town meeting is historically our zoning packages go to annual town meeting. Only in emergency do we go to a special town meeting. My thought was, we'll try April. We still, in case everything goes south and it gets really ugly, we still have the ability to try again in September if that's the course of action that both the selectmen, the planning board, and the residents want to take. So it kind of gives us a fallback in case things go south the first time around. One other thing to keep in mind is other state changes to the State Zoning Act is they've changed, zoning has always been 2/3 majority. They have now changed it. If it is pro-housing zoning, you need a simple majority. All other zoning changes still need 2/3 majority. So keep that in mind, because that's another reason why town meeting is going to be important. You're going to need residents out, whichever way you want to vote, you're going to need residents out because it's not the 2/3 majority. I was asked by a developer recently what I thought the chances were, and I said, honestly, if it was 2/3, I don't think it'll pass. So, questions? I saw somebody, Eric?
Mr. Guimond, just to get clarification, when you say when things go south, what is your explanation in regards to if things go south?
Because the state expects us to pass the zoning law.
So
So if things go south,
if this fails,
if this
so I
fails,
wouldn't consider that going south.
if this fails, there is the possibility that it could still go to a special town meeting. But remember, on zoning articles, if they fail, unless there's significant changes, they have to wait 2 years. So unless there's significant changes in a will of politically, select board, planning board, town meeting and stuff, if there's no will of not trying again, that's the town's choice. That's not my choice.
So,
That's what I meant by going south.
the other thing is, because I've heard all of the threats from the state, so if this doesn't pass, what course of action would the state would like to take against these towns that don't pass the zoning ordinance?
They could potentially sue the towns, or they could be a party with an outside group suing the towns over non-compliance. They will not allow us discretionary grants. At the moment, that's where it stands. Whether or not they change their guidelines, again, I can't say.
Right. But I just, like I said, I heard the threats from the state, and also, like you said, outside groups suing the towns and all that and everything, so.
Well, there has been an outside pro-housing advocate group that has, I think, sued, is it Holden?
Hold they're the one, hold up, yeah.
Yeah. So they're the only ones left that haven't done the action plan.
Good for them.
Greg?
Yeah. Sorry.
So, in the event that we end up in a situation where, as you just we go south, so then the state will take the course of action as we don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know.
Right.
But other towns are going to be doing the same, similar. So is there a scheduling type of, something we could be aware of, and just to get the flavor of what's going on in other towns prior to our town meeting? Any other special town meetings that you're aware of?
So the only town that I've known where it's come up already for a town meeting vote has been Pembroke, and they passed it because of what they did was they changed in their industrial district, which is right on the border with Marshfield.
Right.
They changed it from special permit to by right. They already had the 15 units per acre and stuff, but it was by special permit.
And was the zone 2 at that particular, was that when that all
I don't
started?
think they,
I don't think
Was
we
that
ever looked at
separate?
that.
we didn't get that sense.
Okay, sorry, I went a little bit beyond.
Um,
scope of my
I
question.
have a feeling that we're going to have a number of different towns that will be coming into their spring town meetings that might have the same thought. Worst case scenario, it gives us another chance if we
Okay.
want to go there.
Thank you.
Mr. Demon, I know the last meeting you had in regards to this, I believe the law that was passed was very, how can you say, narrowly written. It wasn't big at all, I believe.
I had that slide, that was one of the slides that was cut. It was a small paragraph.
Yes, so
Yes.
you're saying, so when you, if I remember correctly, these potential penalties they may impose on the towns or whatever.
Will be from their guidelines, not state law.
Right, it would be unelected bureaucrats pushing us down, trying to push us down our throat. Right?
All right. Questions? All right, so with my drafting, how many stories should we allow? When I look at that area, we come up to some parcels that are very narrow, very thin, etc. In order to get 15 units per acre on those things, we're talking 6 stories high. My thought is we're going to make the bylaw based on the whole area and that people can combine parcels to get them more usable. That is the way I was going to draft it. But you got to keep in mind, what's your thoughts on your height restrictions? Considering 4 stories is what we have on one of our 40Bs, we'll have it on another 40B, and we have it on the Life Care Center providers green. Those are our 4-story structures.
Wasn't the 4-story due to a walkout though?
On the 40Bs,
Yes.
the walkouts, yes, which is what.
So you're not looking at
Built into
4
the-
floors?
If you're looking at that side of the building, you're looking at 4 floors.
Yeah.
So, if you're looking from the other side, you're looking at 3 stories. I don't think there's a lot of topo change in the area that we're suggesting to become the MBTA district. It's fairly flat, so we're not going to be able to get that built into the side of the hill.
And without a 4th floor, you don't think we'd meet that density requirement?
And it's going to be tough.
Tough, but surpassable.
Well, so another one of the problems is, as I may have glanced over, it is in our zone 2 for both Union Street and Ferry. So they're going to have to put in wastewater treatment systems, just like they did with the 40Bs, and just like they did for the Proprietors Marketplace Life Care Centers. So that is an expense on their side that they would have to cover.
I'm sorry, Greg, who's they? That's going to have to cover these expenses?
The applicant or the
Developer.
So,
developer.
but these are all individual parcels, so if the developer's going to have to go, I mean, most of these are all owned by someone already.
Yes,
So they'll go in and
purchase them.
Yeah, they
do
just
as they
said,
will.
the intent of it is not to, the state doesn't want it developed en masse as the entire 177-acre thing and one, they're looking for different.
So that let people's creativity or whatever
Yes.
develop out.
Remember, we do have condos, so a lot of these apartments have been converted to, but we also have one big area that is still rental with a single owner.
The common term for this has been 15-minute cities.
Yes.
15-minute cities?
Correct.
Walk about it to get to everything you need, but, I mean, it's a broader term, not just for this.
Which again goes by, that 88 acres is, part of that's gonna be your buffer requirements, et cetera. And addressing the,
Mr. Guimond, are there any mixed-use requirements?
you can have mixed use in those developments. There is some language about the mixed use, but you can have it. They don't want you to have offices and stuff on the 2nd, 3rd, or whatever floors. They want residential above that 1st floor.
Now, I know this might be outside of your scope, but with the average home being $750,000 in the town of Marshfield, is any of this even financially feasible for these developers, having to go in and purchase these homes that are already existing?
Well, that's one of the reasons why we didn't hit a residential neighborhood.
Yep.
So I had people suggest to me, well, why don't you go over to Seaview and dump it on Deer Hill and Seaview? The likelihood of getting enough of those residents to say, hey, yeah, I want to sell out, I'm going to get out of here, but also it isn't on the bus line, there are no sidewalks, it doesn't meet the other requirements of the state. This area, unfortunately, could meet the requirements of the state, which is why we've identified it as this is what we're gonna recommend.
So, please forgive me,
That's okay.
this is all new to me. So, you're saying that like Quirk Motors that just went in,
Yep.
someone's going to buy?
I do not expect Quirk to go.
No.
There are certain businesses that I don't expect would go. There are other businesses that maybe it might make sense for them. They could relocate somewhere else.
Yep.
And we do have that big apartment area that is still one rental. There are multiple buildings in there, but it's one, and I believe recently it has resold for quite a bit of money. So I have a feeling that we will see if, say, worst case scenario, if this passes everything and, we get somebody in here and they buy that chunk, we'll probably get one large one, maybe another one or two small ones, and that might be what happens.
And would be okay if Quirk says no. I'm not.
I mean,
We
no
don't
one
want
would be
Quirk
required
to
to
leave.
change it.
We don't want we're not forcing anybody to leave.
Right.
This is a overlay that would be added to the district, and it would be the owner's, do I want to sell out
Discretion,
or
whether
not?
they want to
Right,
go.
right. And then if there's a developer willing to put in that investment to get that either 15 units per acre or 16 unit per acre, or whatever we end up with on the zoning language that we would come to town meeting. Yes?
How many units do you anticipate would have to go in there to fulfill the requirement?
Well, the state would like 1,158.
What has to be built, nothing needs to be built
It
for the
just
town
has
to
to be
meet its
zoned.
requirement.
Just needs to be zoned.
That's what they keep telling us.
Right. It only has to be zoned. We have to pick an area that there's a likelihood that it could happen, and then it would be up to the market to drive it. We just have to zone it.
Okay, that makes,
So the market is there,
Okay.
right? That's the problem.
Sorry, I didn't get that clear.
How many stories are you recommending?
How many stories am I leaning towards?
Yes.
4 max.
4, and if you recommend that and it goes through, would it be the same type of issue that they had down at the Madison, that there's no elevators? Would that?
One of the questions I had initially was, should we require an elevator, etc. Again, that's when we get into this nitty-gritty stuff, and when I get into that, writing that bylaw to bring to town meeting, that's what the state is gonna look at, and then similar to a 40B, they're gonna say, oh, they made it too tough, we're not accepting this and stuff. So there is, and you know what, if town meeting approves something and the state doesn't find that acceptable, then that's where we are at that point. And whether we go back and change that, again, is something the town, meaning town meeting, the residents, select board, planning board, etc., would have to decide what we want to do.
Out of everything we've done with the town so far that's gone through, I see this as being something that's gonna severely change the character of this town.
Whoa. That's for sure.
I don't disagree. Which is why I've been trying to make people aware we have a significant change coming before us that we're gonna have to decide what we're gonna do.
But I look at it, the town would need to get creative to put the language in there to make it that it would be as least desirable to a developer to come in and do that, such as floor 4 not being allowed, 3 floors, whatever really needs to be.
I would modify that a little and say, make the bylaw as best as possible for the town.
Correct. That's what, I'm not an attorney, that sounds fine. But I mean, it's like putting the red light district in a town down at the end of an industrial park, make it so it's not, we have it, we meet the requirements, but it's not really feasible.
So in one of my prior lives, when I was a regional planner, I was working on TOD, Transit-Oriented Development, along commuter rail for the Fall River, New Bedford lines. And to try to get this higher density right at the train stations. I understand, I get the concept, etc. The problem is when you make one size fits all, it doesn't work well and it doesn't sit well.
Yep.
This should be right around the train stations, where you do have that connectivity, etc. Not out in some place where you need cars to get around.
Yep. I don't think people move to Marshfield with their commute being the main focus of living here. As you put earlier in these slides, we have many other benefits to this community, reason that people move there. I don't think their commute was their main concern.
Actually, it's kind of funny because
I lived and worked in Grand Rock for years. I didn't worry about my commute.
Moved to Marshfield because one of the spouses worked in Bourne, and the other one worked in Boston. Another one was in Barnstable and worked in Cambridge and stuff. And they looked at Marshfield and they said, this is good. This is halfway in the middle. It's got an ocean, etc. Yes, the majority of people that come to town, they're moving here because of the beach, or they're moving here. There is other reasons.
Other qualities of life, correct.
Family members are close by, or that type of thing. Like,
Two just very quick things. With my ADA hat on, I think it's discriminatory to force people that have mobility issues
On the
on the
first
first
floor.
floor when it would be nice to live up. And the other thing is, sometimes state policy just doesn't work, and this certainly doesn't, because where the MBTA zoning works perfectly, if you go to Greenbush, right across the street, they took the parking lot, that's perfect. Makes perfect sense to have the high density across from the railroad station. Doesn't necessarily work here.
Can the town force GATRA to come up with more routes that would be, I think of the head to Situate,
so you're talking to the GATRA rep who has been trying for years to get them to get us to Greenbush. They've said it doesn't work. Financially, it won't work. That route doesn't work. They were very excited about the Hanover one, but then COVID hit and their ridership plummeted. They're slowly getting their ridership back. We will be hitting them again about splitting that route. To me, that makes sense because of the connectivity to all those jobs in that area. It is where the jobs are, and it's where those people would be. It makes sense to get the transportation. So we're going to keep on GATRA. We'll keep pushing. Sometimes they're a little slow. We're trying to get a student pass for high school
Which
students.
has turned out to be more complicated. Just quickly onto
The idea
we're
is-
trying to do something great for the kids. Kids want to go to the library, do their homework. Their parents aren't around, there's no bus, but they could take the GATRA to get close to their neighborhood. So we want to get passes, except you have to buy the GATRA will only print them. So I have a call into the chair of the GATRA board to see why we can't have them printed, at least with like each book is just 2 rides back and forth, as opposed to having
10 rides.
10 rides, which if a child loses that, it's gone. And most kids lose things. I lose things.
How many people use it here?
I don't have a current ridership number. They haven't taken ridership numbers since COVID.
Yeah.
I
Well, they
pay
must- they must
attention.
know.
I pay attention when they drive by town hall, and it varies. Sometimes it's 1, 2, sometimes I've seen as many as 5 people midday. Typically, it's the people in our housing developments that are going shopping and stuff. They're the ones that are using it. Winslow Village uses it a lot. Some of the other developments use it a lot. Part of the problem on the GATRA bus side is on 139, they have to stop in a travel lane to pick up people when they're heading out to Pembroke. One of the things that I was considering putting down as one of our requirements as either we get a centralized bus area or we get little pull-offs so at least they get out of the travel lane when they're trying to stop to pick up people.
Oh, you do away with bike.
Similar to like what I pushed for Modera and Mill Creek to have a bus stop up in the development. The second time around, we got the bus stop in the development. For some reason, they really didn't want to do it, but it makes sense. Walking up and down that hill every day to get the Roach Brothers, to get the GATRA bus, is not transportation to Boston. All right, we got 2 more slides. Anything on this side, the setbacks between buildings? I mean, one of the things when we get into the higher density and higher heights is people feel closed in, so should we, put in some language about buffering between buildings in the same lot? Should we have minimum parking requirements? To me, one car, space or a half space doesn't really make sense. You've got to have cars here. Yes, we might have gantry, but we're going to need parking spaces.
Greg,
Yes,
so this zoning will just be on the one side of 139 and not both
that's what,
sides?
at the moment, the planning department is recommending. Planning board hasn't voted on this yet, selectmen or anybody, nobody has voted on this yet, because I don't have the finalized language. But we have a limited window, because I think it's January 2nd, the warrant opens, and then the 23rd it closes, or 22nd.
Just about there.
So we have a condensed time to do this. I wanted to make sure people understood the area that we were thinking of. It is the north side from School Street to the Granite people.
Direct rent.
Direct Granite.
Your map included, the shaded area included the south part of 139,
Yeah,
That was just the circle, but it was the red area.
right there.
This red outline, because we have to have complete, one of the state requirements is that they're complete lots. So that's why it's this funny little zigzag, and then this is School Street, and this is 139.
okay.
So here's Direct Granite, here's DJ Sullivan, that's the storage company, that's Luchetti's. Going down.
School Street is the top right.
It's not the
Top
purple
left
area,
area.
it's just
School
the
Street,
dark.
the purple area is our zone 2.
Okay,
That's what that is.
all right.
But if you look, all the other ones have all these other things on it, wetlands features and other things that we're supposed to stay away from. The one thing that's on this district is the water resource protection. There are no wetlands, et cetera. There are no other excluded areas on this section.
No, just for a landmark, School Street right there. Where's the Rod and Gun Club?
Rod and Gun Club, up there.
So substantially past where that's.
It's not near the Rod and Gun Club.
Okay.
If you look at the air photo,
That's what the line is right
here's Direct Granite, here's DJ Sullivan, the high school. Here's some of the Fox Run. This is all Fox Run. Here's Quirk. Here's Castle Green, I think, and then you got the businesses along the road here. So that's kind of that area.
So tell me something, would the town's idea mostly be that, mostly Fox Run would be something that would be renovated and changed over? Is that the anticipation of the town?
Not of the town.
Well,
That is my
That-
thought
would that be a
of the
consideration?
likely,
Yeah.
that is my thought of the likely, one
that
of the
appears
likely
to be the most
potential areas.
affordable piece that would be purchased by a developer.
Well, it has recently been purchased.
Really?
Yeah,
You said for substantial.
a substantial amount of money.
Yeah.
Mr. Guimond, I mean, as Mr. Keen's bringing up in regards to Fox Run, and you're saying it's been recently purchased, I mean, the owner of that could actually develop that property himself, right? And be part of this?
Yep. Yep.
So maybe maybe the goal of why they developed it, because they have plans of, if this goes through, to expand it anyways. So,
The existing density in that area is like 10 to 12 units. So that 15 to 16 unit range thing, it's a step up, but it's not a huge step up. On our side, I think we should require the affordable units in the development, not take the fee in lieu of, because that's what we want. We want to spread the units out, et cetera. Because the state wants family housing, we should have a requirement for playgrounds, et cetera. Should we have a higher density if we ask for high, say we want 15 or 20 units per acre? Are we willing to make it 18 or 20 units per acre for the overall density in order to get that higher affordability clause? Those are things to think about. Like I said, you can email us, you can talk to the select board, planning board members, et cetera, on these thoughts. We're gonna have to figure out the impervious surface, because that's the one thing on the water resource protection. Last slide. I'm shooting for December 6th for our next meeting, because again, we got that limited window to get this thing wrapped up. Again, I was thinking of the 6:30 start time, unless people say, please, no, make it 7. I was hoping for this room, but I have not been able to confirm, so fallback would be the senior center. Any other thoughts or questions? Because I wanted to get you guys out, it is 8:04.
Have you looked at the existing configurations on those, like Fox Run and other apartments?
They're all weird pork chop lots.
Are they, so they don't meet any kind of setback requirements because of their,
They had setback requirements, I believe, at the time when they were built. I don't know what they were, because there are kind of uniform distances from the property line to the buildings and stuff. But the way they're chopped up, the person who would redevelop this would merge them all into one lot, or he may knock down some of the buildings and do like a rolling phasing of the redevelopment and stuff. There's multiple ways this could
so
happen.
you could allow redrawing of lots in front
Oh,
of
yeah, I would
lots?
expect a redrawing of lots if
And-
this were to happen.
Well, it sounds like it might make sense if you do the calculation to reduce setbacks, just to reduce the need for 6-story buildings.
Well, I would draft the language as it's 4-story buildings.
Right. Other than that, I suggest we allow them to build 4 stories underground.
For all the parking? All right, anyone? Eric?
Just thinking about, I just want to say that, I know you're looking for community feedback on this, and that's all fine. I'd be thinking that if anyone's opposed to this, they wouldn't participate in it at all and just let you carry on what you got to do. I mean, I myself, come April, I'm going to be a no on this all the way across, regardless of how it's written. So, that's my thoughts there.
I will not take offense.
I understand. I don't want you to.
Everybody should vote what they think.
Then the other thing I would like to suggest, as Mr. Maresco was here, is that I suspect this probably will fail come April, and if you decide to bring it back in October, the special town meeting, but in April, maybe budget the legal fund for a little more in case we do get the onslaught of others to sue us in order to force us into this, which as a town, no entity outside group should be trying to force us to accept this, especially the non-elected bureaucrats.
Okay. Any final comments?
I mean, the only comment I would make is, first of all, I want to say thank you. This was a great presentation. And second of all, hopefully people here will share this information. You'll have this up on the website. People will be able to take a look at it. And it really is going to be a personal vote. People have to decide, is this in the best interest of the town? Because, as I think the salient point on this is that when it first came out and the administration got some kickback from, not kickback, but some fight because it did not have the words affordable. It was just housing. And
Market rate housing.
market rate housing, so that doesn't help market rate. We went through how expensive that is. So people need to think about it, follow up. We need to come to December 6th, come here, and then be ready to come to town meeting, and then people vote how they feel comfortable.
The map is also online. If
Now,
you
at one of these
needed to see
meetings, at one of these meetings, could we have somebody that could give the pros and cons to this? What the negative to the town would be if it was not passed, and what the pros to passing this to the town would be?
There would be beatings, I'm sure.
But, somebody,
Sorry.
You need dinner.
The planning.
someone that could give us the clear and accurate view, what the consequences to the town would be if this did not pass.
I don't think the
and what the
state
benefits
has
would be.
fully decided what the consequences are. I've told you what they have currently. It
Certainly.
is discretionary grants
Mhm.
we would not be able to get.
But what
That
type,
is
okay,
their
with that
main
being
thing.
said, what type of impact would that be on the community?
What's the volume?
For the most part, we don't use those grants.
Okay, so that tells me minimum.
MVP may be the only grant we would use, and you know what? We could fund that potentially
Okay.
ourselves.
And there must be some pros to this being passed by the community, so what would that be?
We would have more, potentially, market rate and affordable units in the town.
Okay. Now, that 10%, who governs that? At a project going in being 10%?
The affordable housing, the chapter 40B,
Yeah?
it used to be DHCD, it's now, whatever the initials are, EOLCH or something like that.
Would the town have any ability of raising that percentage to a developer?
I'm sorry. You're talking
instead
about
of being
the
10%,
10%
we could-
requirement in the
Correct,
MBTA communities.
correct.
The town could raise that in our zoning bylaw, but we would have to submit, there's a economic study thing that we would have to submit along with it to show, similar to a 40B, that we didn't make the development financially viable.
Yeah, but I mean, could we do something like that and walk that fine line?
Well, one of my questions was, should we go to 15% or should we go to 20? But realize we will probably have to bump up that
Yeah.
density number in order to get those more affordable units.
Okay. Because myself personally, I could see being lower in tighter,
But
less
also
setbacks
remember
than
that
higher in further
the
setbacks.
10% is an 80%, and as I've already showed you, that does not help your school teachers, firemen, police officers, etc.,
So,
town hall employees and stuff. That affordable is still pretty expensive housing.
It is, but even with the affordable rent, say the affordable was 2,400, whatever the exact number was, that doesn't mean the individual renting that unit wouldn't be using some other type of subsidy to get into that unit, correct?
That's anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and it does not address Section 8.
That's what I'm saying. Some
It
kind
does not
of,
address Section 8. Section 8 could go in there,
Could
Yeah.
go into a market rate.
it could go into a market rate unit.
and just take that off of the market rate, okay,
All right, I'm gonna try to,
thank you.
Just so it's clear to me, passing this at town meeting, and let's say it does go through, means that the state would hopefully accept the proposal. So it doesn't mean because it's passed, it has to be developed. All they're looking for is us, the town, giving them the potential to have a development. Doesn't say it has to go through. Am I correct?
that's what they've told us.
It doesn't have to be built.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you
But once you
agreed
give-
to designate that area as.
Yes.
But once you give anyone who's looking to develop land or anything,
Right.
and you give them the ability, like,
Right.
oh, I can put 15 units on an acre right there,
Right.
Right.
boy howdy, they're gonna be all over it trying to figure it out.
Right.
That's the signatures law, say now you have to build on it.
And also, keep in mind, they've already changed the guidelines twice. The state law, just like chapter 40B, that chapter will stay the same, but they have changed those guidelines and those CMRs multiple times. So 10 years from now, who knows what those guidelines could be?
A year from now.
Sounds like the tax base could be impacted.
All right, I'm done. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Greg.